When my wife passed away, her company's CEO called me and said, "I found something. Come to my office right now." Then he said, "Don't tell your son or his wife. You could be in danger." When I walked into that building and saw who was already standing at the front desk, I froze. If you're new here, stay with me, because this story goes somewhere you won't see coming. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Hit that like button before we start. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. My name is Walter Doyle. I'm 63 years old. I ran a small feed and hardware store off Route 9 outside Bozeman, Montana, for almost 30 years before I sold it and retired. I was married to my wife, Eleanor, for 34 years. This story is hers as much as it's mine. Maybe more. The funeral was on a Thursday, the second week of October, at Hillcrest Funeral Home on Durston Road. It was cold that morning, the kind of cold that gets into your knuckles before you notice it's there. I stood at the front of that chapel in the same gray suit I wore to our son's wedding 12 years ago, looking at a casket holding the only woman I'd ever loved, waiting for it to feel real. It didn't, not yet. Eleanor had died 9 days earlier. The doctors called it heart failure, sudden, unexpected, especially cruel, because she'd just turned 60 that summer and had always been the healthiest person I knew. I believed them because I had no reason not to. For 22 years, Eleanor worked as the executive assistant to Richard Ashford, who owned Ashford Textiles, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been in his family 3 generations. She loved that job. She used to say Richard trusted her with things he wouldn't tell his own board of directors. And looking back now, I understand exactly how true that was. About 50 people came to the service. Neighbors, old customers from the store. My brother drove up from Idaho. Our son, Nathan, sat in the front pew next to his wife, Chelsea, and I remember thinking how strange it was that neither of them cried. Not once. Chelsea kept her phone face down on her knee, checking it every few minutes, and Nathan kept leaning over to murmur something to her, quick and low. The way people talk when they're managing a problem, not mourning a mother. At 11:47 that morning, right in the middle of the pastor's closing words, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I saw the name on the screen. Richard Ashford. I stepped into the hallway, my pulse already climbing, and when I answered, his voice was tight in a way I had never once heard from that man. "Walter," he said, "I found something. I need you to come to my office right now. To understand why that call frightened me the way it did, you need to understand who Richard Ashford was." He was not a man who rattled easily. I'd met him a handful of times over the years, at company holiday parties. At the retirement dinner, Eleanor kept postponing because she loved that job too much to leave it. Every time he was calm, measured, the kind of man who owned half a city block downtown and still remembered the names of the janitorial staff's kids. Hearing his voice shake on the phone told me something was badly wrong. "What did you find?" I asked, standing in that quiet hallway with organ music leaking through the door behind me. "Not on the phone." He said, "Come to my office, and Walter, listen to me. Don't tell your son. Don't tell his wife. Not yet. You could be in danger. I need to explain something about my family before I go any further, because none of what happens next makes sense without it. Eleanor and I built a good, plain life on a hardware store's income and her assistant's salary. We paid off our house on Cottonwood Lane. We had a modest retirement account we were proud of, and we helped our son whenever he needed it, which over the last 2 years had become far more often than I liked to admit. Nathan was 34, married to Chelsea for 5 years. He'd lost his job at an agricultural supply company back in 2023 and had been drifting between half-finished business ideas ever since. Over the past year, the two of them had started coming around more. Sunday dinners turned into Tuesday visits, turned into Chelsea offering, out of nowhere, to help Eleanor stay organized with her medications and paperwork, since, in Chelsea's words, Mom's not getting any younger. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Eleanor hadn't either. Looking back now, that's exactly the problem. In the weeks before she died, something had changed in Eleanor, and I hadn't paid close enough attention. She tired more easily. She said her mornings felt foggy. Her heart doctor adjusted her blood pressure medication twice, trying to sort it out. Chelsea had started coming by on Mondays and Thursdays, always with the same excuse, helping Eleanor sort her weekly pill organizer so she wouldn't miss a dose. One Thursday in September, I came home early from a supply run and found Chelsea alone in our kitchen with Eleanor's pill organizer open on the counter, and Eleanor asleep on the couch in the middle of the afternoon, which she never did. Chelsea smiled at me, said Eleanor was just tired from gardening, and left 10 minutes later. I didn't think a thing of it. My wife trusted her daughter-in-law. I trusted my wife's judgment. 4 days before she died, Eleanor asked me if I remembered signing some papers at the kitchen table back in June, something about updating our power of attorney in case anything happened to either of us as we got older. I told her I didn't remember any such thing. She frowned, said Nathan had mentioned bringing papers by for us to look over, and figured she'd simply forgotten. We let it go. We had no reason not to. The morning she died, a Sunday, I was out at the feed store checking on the new owner. Eleanor called Nathan first because I wasn't picking up, and by the time I got home 14 minutes later, the paramedics were already loading her into the ambulance. She was gone before we reached the hospital. Cardiac arrest, they told me, sudden, unexpected. Nobody asked a single question past that, and in my grief, neither did I. Standing in that hallway with Richard Ashford's voice shaking in my ear, all of it came rushing back at once. The pill organizer, the paperwork I never signed, the way Nathan and Chelsea had been circling my wife for months like they were waiting on something. Richard, tell me what's going on. I said, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry back into the chapel. I can't explain it over the phone. Eleanor left something with me, a letter and a flash drive. She gave it to me 3 weeks ago and told me to open it only if something happened to her. Walter, I opened it this morning after I heard. And what's on it? I need you to see it yourself. Come straight here. Don't stop at the house, and whatever you do, don't mention this call to Nathan or Chelsea. My hands were shaking by the time I hung up. I went back into the chapel, sat through the final minutes without hearing a word of them. And when the pastor finished and people started filing toward the cars, I told Nathan I had some paperwork from the funeral home I needed to sort out and would meet everyone back at the house for the gathering. Nathan barely looked up from his phone. Sure, Dad, whatever you need. Chelsea didn't glance my way at all. She was already walking toward the parking lot, heels fast on the wet pavement, talking low into her phone to someone I couldn't see. I stood there a second, watching my son's wife hurry away from her mother-in-law's own funeral like she had somewhere far more important to be, and that cold feeling from the hallway settled deeper into my chest. I got into my truck and drove downtown with my wife's casket still fresh in the ground behind me, with no idea the worst part of that day hadn't happened yet. Ashford Textiles took up the top 2 floors of a brick building near the old rail yard, the kind of building Eleanor used to point out with pride every time we drove past it. I parked in the visitor lot at noon, still in my funeral suit, my tie loosened, my mind racing through every version of what Richard could possibly need to show me. I walked through the lobby, and that's when I saw a car pull hard into the loading zone outside the glass doors behind me. Fast, careless, half in a spot that wasn't a spot at all. It was Nathan's blue pickup. I stopped walking completely. My son was supposed to be at the house right now, greeting neighbors, standing where a son is supposed to stand on the day his mother goes into the ground. Instead, here he was, downtown at his mother's old office building, less than 30 minutes after telling me he'd meet me back at the house. I stepped behind a pillar near the elevators, my heart hammering, and watched through the glass as Nathan got out and jogged toward the entrance, straightening his jacket, his face pale in a way I'd never seen on him before. He wasn't grieving, he looked like a man running out of time. I watched him walk straight up to the front desk, not the elevators, leaning in, talking fast and low to the receptionist. She shook her head. He said something else, more insistent, and she picked up the phone to check with someone upstairs. I used that moment to slip past them both toward the elevator, my suit blending into the lobby traffic just enough that Nathan never turned around. Richard was waiting outside the elevator on the 4th floor, his face pale, his own tie already loosened. "Thank God," he said, and before I could speak added, "Did you see him downstairs? That's my son." I said, "Richard, what is going on? I called your house by mistake this morning before I reached your cell, and Chelsea picked up. I only told her I needed to speak with you about paperwork Eleanor left behind. I didn't say what. Apparently that was enough to send your son racing down here to get to it before you did." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Richard led me down the hall, and over his shoulder, without turning around, he said the words that changed everything. "Your wife knew something was happening to her, Walter, and she made sure I'd be the one to tell you, not them." Richard's office looked out over the rail yard toward the mountains, the kind of view Eleanor used to describe over dinner like she owned a piece of it. He closed the door, locked it, and pulled a plain envelope from behind a framed photo on his shelf. Eleanor's handwriting was across the front, for Walter only, if anything happens to me. "She brought this 3 weeks ago," he said, sitting across from me instead of behind his desk, which told me something about how seriously he was taking this. Said she didn't trust keeping it at the house. Said if anything happened to her, I was to give it to you, in person, and warn you to be careful who you told. My hands shook opening it. Inside was a folded letter in Eleanor's handwriting, and a small flash drive taped to the back. In it, Eleanor wrote that she'd noticed money missing from our retirement account. Small amounts first, then larger ones, moved out over about 4 months. She wrote she'd asked Nathan about papers she didn't remember signing, and he'd brushed her off. But something in his face made her uneasy enough to start quietly checking our bank statement. Herself, she wrote she'd found a power of attorney filed with our bank, dated in June, with both our signatures on it, except she never signed it, and she was fairly sure I hadn't either. She wrote she'd started feeling strange in the mornings around the same time Chelsea began helping organize her pills, and that she didn't want to believe what she was starting to suspect. But she wasn't willing to stay quiet about it either. "There's more on the drive," Richard said quietly. "Financial records, messages. Walter, I think you should sit down for this part." The first folder held bank statements Eleanor had screenshotted herself, highlighting 4 transfers out of our retirement account totaling just over $58,000, all authorized with a power of attorney neither of us had signed. The money had gone into an account under Nathan and Chelsea's names. The second folder held photographs of pharmacy receipts next to her prescription bottles, with notes comparing dosages in her own handwriting. She'd written that the pill count in her organizer never matched what the pharmacy had filled, that there always seemed to be extra pills she didn't recognize mixed in with her real medication. The third folder was the one that put ice straight through my chest. A screenshot of a text conversation Eleanor had found on the shared family tablet we kept in the kitchen. A conversation between Chelsea and someone saved only as Reed from 3 weeks before she died. Chelsea had written that Eleanor was getting suspicious about the account, and they needed to move faster before she said something to me. Reed's reply said not to worry, that nobody questions a heart problem at her age if you're patient about it. I sat there staring at that screen, feeling something break loose in my chest I didn't have words for. Richard put a hand on my shoulder and told me Eleanor had come to him specifically because she was afraid that if something happened to her, whoever was responsible would try to control the story. Before I ever saw the truth, she wanted to make sure that didn't happen. She protected you from beyond the grave, Richard said. Now we protect you for real. I asked him why he'd warned me to keep Nathan and Chelsea away from this. He said it plainly. If Eleanor's suspicions were right, and the evidence in front of us said they very likely were, then Nathan and Chelsea were capable of far more than theft. And if they realized this drive existed, I could be next in line, especially with a forged power of attorney already sitting on file. We need proof strong enough for the police, Richard said. Not just suspicion, and we need it before they know we're looking. That afternoon, Richard called an old friend, a retired detective named Sam Whitfield, who now did private investigative work out of a small office downtown. Sam went through the drive twice, quiet the whole time, then said what none of us wanted to hear out loud. "This is enough to open an investigation," he said. "It's not enough yet to guarantee a conviction. We need the pharmacy records pulled officially, a forensic look at that signature, and honestly, Walter, if you're willing, a camera in your house for a short while would give us the rest, because people like this talk when they think nobody's listening." I sat there, my wife 9 days in the ground, being asked to walk back into my own home and act as though nothing had changed while my son and his wife believed they'd gotten away with something unthinkable. It was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked of me. I said yes without hesitating because Eleanor had trusted me with the truth, and I wasn't about to waste it. Sam installed 2 small cameras 2 nights later, one in a kitchen smoke detector, one inside a bookshelf clock in the living room, while Nathan and Chelsea believed I was staying with my brother in Idaho to grieve. I moved back home the following Monday and told everyone I just needed to be near Eleanor's things a while. It took 13 days. 13 days of sitting across the dinner table from my son and his wife, nodding along while Chelsea gently asked when I thought I might be ready to simplify things and consider selling the house. Every night I went to bed sick to my stomach, and every morning I got up and did it again, because Sam told me the moment they felt safe was the moment they'd stop being careful. On the 14th night it happened. Nathan and Chelsea came for dinner, and after I went upstairs early claiming I was tired, the kitchen camera caught them alone at the table, voices low but clear. Chelsea said the account was fully transferred, and once I signed off on the house, they'd be finished. They wouldn't even need the power of attorney anymore. Nathan told her not to get sloppy the way she had with his mother, that the pharmacist had almost caught the refill pattern. Chelsea laughed and said nobody double checks an old woman's heart medication. Nobody ever does. Sam had that footage filed within the hour, combined with pharmacy records showing an unexplained early refill pattern, and a forensic handwriting analysis confirming the power of attorney was forged. We had what Sam called an airtight case. We decided to bring it out into the open at the reading of Eleanor's will, scheduled the following week at our family attorney's office. Nathan and Chelsea had no idea Sam would be waiting in the room next door, or that 2 detectives would be parked outside in an unmarked car. I spent that week acting exactly as I had for 13 days, tired, quiet, cooperative, letting Chelsea believe her plan was working. She hugged me the morning of the meeting and told me she was proud of how strong I was being. I let her arms wrap around me, thinking about that text message on Richard's laptop, and felt nothing but cold, steady patience. We sat down in the attorney's office that morning, Nathan in a dark suit, Chelsea composed, both of them clearly expecting a formality before collecting what they believed was already theirs. Partway through the reading, I said I had something to add. I nodded toward the door. Richard walked in with his laptop, followed by Sam Whitfield, whose face Nathan seemed to recognize because the color drained out of my son immediately. "What is this?" Chelsea's voice came out sharp. "Walter, what's going on? Your mother-in-law," I said, "is what's going on." Richard played the kitchen footage without a word of introduction. Chelsea's own voice filled that office, talking about the account, about not needing the power of attorney anymore. Then Nathan's voice, warning her not to get sloppy the way she had with his mother. The room went dead silent except for that recording, every word landing like a hammer. Chelsea stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. That's not what it sounds like. That's taken out of context. Sit down, Sam said, showing his credentials. There are 2 detectives outside this office right now. Everything you say can be used against you. Financial exploitation of an elder, forgery, and a pending toxicology review tied to an exhumation. Request already filed with the coroner's office. Nathan hadn't said a word yet. He sat staring at the table, and I watched something break in my son's face. Not innocence, because that was long gone, but the look of a man who finally understood there was nowhere left to run. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking, "I never wanted her to actually die. I swear. It was just supposed to slow her down, keep her confused enough that she wouldn't fight the paperwork." I felt Richard's hand land on my shoulder, steady, grounding me, because for 1 second the room tilted and all I could see was Eleanor in that hospital bed. I never reached in time. But I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Your mother sat at that table every Sunday for 30 years making sure you had a full plate before she filled her own. I said quietly, "And you sat across from her counting down how long until you got the house?" The detectives came in 2 minutes later. Chelsea cried the whole way out. Nathan didn't say another word. It's been almost a year now. Nathan pled guilty to financial exploitation of an elder and forgery, and is currently serving a 4-year sentence. Chelsea's case went further. The exhumation and toxicology review confirmed dangerously elevated levels of Eleanor's heart medication in her system, far beyond anything prescribed. Chelsea was convicted of involuntary manslaughter alongside the financial charges. She's looking at 12 years. Reed, it turned out, was Chelsea's cousin, a pharmacy technician now facing his own separate charges. I still live in the house on Cottonwood Lane. Some mornings it's quiet in a way that used to hurt, and now it mostly just feels honest. I got the retirement money back through the court, though honestly, the money was never really the point. Richard Ashford and I have become close friends since all of this, something neither of us expected. He tells me Eleanor used to talk about me at the office more than I ever knew, always proud, always certain I'd do right by her if it ever came to it. I set up a small memorial fund in Eleanor's name through the cardiac care unit at Bozeman Deaconess for families who can't afford the follow-up care that might have caught what was happening to her sooner. It's not much yet, but it's growing, and every dollar in it carries her name forward doing something good. Exactly the kind of thing she would have wanted. I think about that hallway outside the funeral home a lot. Richard's voice shaking on the phone, telling me to come see something before it was too late to matter. My wife protected me one last time from beyond the grave, and I intend to spend whatever years I have left making sure that protection meant something. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and let me know your thoughts. And subscribe if you want more real stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one.